Good morning, Rabbi Rabotai. We are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Harachaim, and we are in Siman Nun Gimel, Seif Yutet, Daf Pei Gimel Amud Aleph, the regular prince of Mishna Berurah. Maran writes that Afilu Yachid Yachol La'akev Velomar Eni Rotzeh Shploni Yechazan. When you're appointing a Shaliach Tzibur, even a Yachid, even an individual could say, I don't want this Shaliach Tzibur. Of course, we're not talking about there are always people that they're not okay with everything or anything. We're talking about someone that has a legitimate argument of why this Chazan is not good, because a Shaliach Tzibur has to be the Shaliach of the entirety of Tzibur. So therefore, even one person could say, this Shaliach Tzibur does not qualify, I don't want him, he shouldn't be. And even if you have 500 other people who say it should be, one person can stop it. This is the beauty of democracy when it comes to Am Yisrael, because this is representation of Am Yisrael to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's representing every single person. Now we'll get to this when we get to later halachot, that if the Shaliach Tzibur has in mind that one person, he hates one person in the Tzibur, and he doesn't want to be motzi him, he's completely disqualified even for other people. But this, says Maran, if in the beginning he agreed with him, and now he developed some personal animosity towards him or whatnot, that's considered already that you agreed with him, and you can't back down on that. But once he has been appointed already as the Shaliach Tzibur of the congregation, the community, that you cannot back down on. But in the beginning, when people want to hire someone, a person could object. The Ramah adds a clarification over here. V'davka, as we mentioned, v'davka sheyelo oto yachid ta'am hagun. We're talking about the individual that has actually a legitimate reason. Al pito v'ha'ir, it's a halachically viable and logical argument that he has opposing the appointment of the Shaliach Tzibur. Otherwise, he cannot really, one person cannot stop a Tzibur from appointing someone just because he doesn't like this guy on a personal level. If he has no legitimate arguments of why he can't be Shaliach Tzibur, then he can't stop it. Ve'imhu son'o yachol limchot bo kodem she'iskim alav. And if he is an enemy, he's considered an enemy. You could disagree with appointment of it before the appointment happens. Someone that is, this is interesting, someone that's hated, hates the Shaliach Tzibur, or the Shaliach Tzibur hates him, they've had a history together and so on, they should not give an aliyah to this person when Shaliach Tzibur is reading the parasha of Kilalot. When you're reading the parasha of Bechukotai and Kitavo, and he's saying Yakecha Hashem, and he's looking at this guy, and he hates him. He says, I'm talking to you. So that, of course, is something that, by the way, we're going to discuss this when we do the Mishna Berurah right now, but this is one of the reasons that Kehilot have different minhagim when it comes to who gets the aliyah of Parashat Kilalot. In some communities, nobody gets the aliyah. Some communities, the Chazan himself gets the aliyah. The Baal Koreh gets the aliyah that he gets. In some communities, they don't differentiate; they just sell it. In some communities, the rabbi says it, right? Because everyone loves the rabbi. Hopefully, I think this is something that I try to say every year. I would love to get the aliyah of Parashat Tokachot, because it is et asher yoav Hashem yochiach. You only, I used to say this to the kids when they were younger, when they did something wrong. Always the discussion that we had started with the fact of that have you ever seen Abba have this meeting with the neighbor's kids? And the answer was no. And the question following that was, why not? Why do I not chastise or rebuke or meet with the neighbor's kids when they do something wrong? The reason is because I don't care about them as much as I care about you. When you care about someone deeply, it bothers you when they're doing something wrong. The element of tochacha altogether is the greatest sign that HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares about us. There's a relationship there. If Hashem will leave you, that would be not caring. So that's the most beautiful part of the Torah is that indicates that relationship that's real to some in some aspect, in some strange aspect, is that the parasha of Tochachot. So it's not something to dread, it's something to humbly stand there and listen to the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The more consequences you have, the bigger relationship it indicates. And that's something to think about, just the change of perspective on parasha of Tochachot. Now let's study together the Mishna Berurah. Here Chafetz Chaim writes, if the fellow says, I don't want this Shliach Tzibur to be our Chazan, we're talking about the case, let's say he's legitimate, he has a good reason, right? For instance, we had scenarios that they said, well, the halacha says the Chavchira Shliach Tzibur should be 30 years old, should be married, right? And this guy is not 30 years old. Get somebody else. So that's a legitimate argument, especially for Yamim Noraim. But then, says the Mishna Berurah, that's only in the case that there is another person to hire and you could afford them. Two things. If there's nobody better, and he says, well, so you tell him, okay, so who should we do? He says, I don't know. But he's not 30 years old. So if it's not logical because you don't have anybody better, or there is one more person, but he's much more expensive. So you tell them, look, we can't afford. The kahal could tell this individual, so we can't afford that person. You want to put the difference, you want to lay down the difference, Gavaldik, we do it. And that would be the halachic aspect. About if you can't find anyone better, or you could find this individual wants to hire someone that's much more expensive. They could tell him, we can't afford this unless you want to pay the difference. This is not just a thing of Chazan. This could be when the kahal wants to hire a Rav, a teacher of Torah, right? An assistant rabbi. The kahal could also talk like one individual could say this person doesn't have good midot. I've verified things about him that's not proper. I don't want him to be the teacher for my kids, right? Again, this becomes a little bit sensitive when you get to schools and stuff like that because they're multifaceted. Some of these organizations are extremely multifaceted and complex, the way the hiring and firing work. So you have to take everything with a spoon of salt. But the core of halakha is a beautiful thing that a person that deals with the tzibur has to be merutze lekol hakahal. He has to be beloved and accepted upon everybody. So says the Mishna Berurah, he gives a beautiful musar, a piece of musar over here, which is nice to read the whole thing. Says the Chafetz Chaim, אבל אם מוכר שאינו רוצה שיהיה מרביץ תורה בקהל, פשיטא שאין במחאתו קידום. If he says that I don't want this person to be teaching Torah at all, so then of course he's not, he's not valid. His objection is not valid. ואפילו המיעוט יכולים לאכוף לרוב. אפילו ברוצה למנות אחר, אם אותו שרוב הקהל מסכימים עליו הוא עדיף מזה, if the person that the majority of tzibur wants is better than the individual that this guy wants, then of course he can't argue. For instance, let's say this guy has a relative or someone and he wants to bring that person, or for whatever reason he connects with the teachings of another individual, and Rov HaKahal don't want that. Of course he cannot argue that he wants that individual to be the teacher. Now this is where it becomes interesting. Achronim write that this halakha of Shulchan Aruch is only in the time of Chazal. אבל היום שידוע בעוונותינו הרבים, that nowadays, בעוונותינו הרבים, unfortunately, הרבה מחזיקים במחלוקת בלי טעם. We have many people who like machloket. This guy, no, I don't want this guy. Why? I don't know why. I have to think, I don't like his looks, right? The way he speaks irks me. We don't have those same criterias that they had in the time of Chazal, and many people just like to argue because they want to argue. They're machzik b'machloket, beli ta'am v'reach, without proper reasoning. And their kavanah is not necessarily the Shem Shamayim. If you would want to ask every individual in the shul, right, to hire a chazan, then you would be the shul without the chazan, right? It'll never happen. You have, Baruch Hashem, you have 2 Jews in one island. You have 3 shuls for them. There's one shul that each one of them goes to, and one shul that is for the other ones. So, there would be never an agreement of a unanimous agreement. You would never get. Therefore, you go after the majority of paying members, people who are, helping the community with the expenses of the community. Those you take in. There are people who always pay. There are people who can't afford to pay. Those who are paying are the ones that you take majority from them, because they are running basically the financial aspects of the shul, and the majority of them is not the majority of the money, but it's the majority of the numbers. In other words, this is where you see a combination between the paying members, but not the amount that's paid, but nevertheless, people's numbers. So you could have one billionaire that's paying all the bills of the shul, but if other people, they're paying members and he is outnumbered, he's out. Right? Sometimes easier said than done. This past year, there was a story in one of the shuls, not here, but a very sad story that one person wanted to force the entire shul to do something very embarrassing in public. That was because he felt that he was, he was contributing more than everyone else in the shul, and you tell him jump in the lake, because it goes after the majority of the community that are participants, but not the one person that's perhaps the bigger contributor. And even if you have pesul kurva, Magen Avraham says still it would be the part of the majority. And he adds that nowadays you have, for congregations of the city, you have shiv'atu b'ha'ir. Sometimes you have cities that the entire city has been built from a yeshiva, from an authority that everyone basically comes up to certain body of authority of Torah, which is called Shiv'atu B'Ha'ir, 7 elders of the city. So unfortunately, in many cities, you don't have that, because it's become the Wild West, that everyone does what they want. But in many cities still, the smaller ones, especially those who started from a yeshiva, and the entire city was built around the yeshiva, you have this element that the Rosh Yeshiva, the other people, the top Rabbanim, the great Rabbanim of the town, they control the decisions, the major decisions that are made in town, which is a beautiful thing, because there's a certain harmony in those cities that everything works together, because everything is synced in within the same system. So the Chafetz Chaim says in Europe in their time, it was based on Shiv'atu V'Ha'ir, 7 elders of the city, that they basically made those difficult decisions. Now, says the Mishna Berurah, this fact that you have someone that hates him, we spoke about the fact that if somebody is son and then we said that perhaps you shouldn't give him the aliyah of kilalot. Says the Mishna Berurah, if you know, the community knows, Reuben and Shimon hate each other as gods. That's known in the community. If you want to hire Shimon in Reuben's shul, Reuben could say, I don't want him. Because we know the halakha is that you can't make someone my agent against my will. If I don't want this person to be my agent, and everyone knows about it, then, and I'm part of this shul, I've been part of this shul, so then you can't do that. But if it's not known to anybody, so far as everyone is concerned, you see them always hugging each other and inviting each other for Shabbat, and now all of a sudden you want to appoint Shimon. Reuben says, no, I hate this guy. That we don't believe in. We don't. But if it's known in the community, that's something that he could actually use against Shimon from being appointed for the Shliach Tzibur. Soneh l'Shliach Tzibur, רוצה לומר, כיוון שהוא שונא לשליח ציבור, מסתמא השליח ציבור גם כן אינו אוהבו. This element of not giving aliyah of kelalot to someone that does not have a positive relationship with the Baal Koreh, with the Shaliach Tzibur, we assume that if Reuben hates Shimon, Shimon also doesn't really love Reuben that much, and therefore, maybe because of the animosity that has brewed between them, the Chazan, the Shaliach Tzibur, when he reads the Tochacha, he will have the kavanah when he says the words, that it should be, affecting in a negative way the person that's next to him getting the aliyah. It's maybe there is something to be worried about. Al-Ken Pasak. Therefore, I tell you something, even if it's not because of that, imagine if this guy gets an aliyah, right? And again goes home and a dish breaks at home. Whose fault it is? Shaliach Tzibur. So because he read the Shaliach Tzibur and I got the aliyah, anything that goes wrong from there on, it becomes the fault of the Shaliach, even if he had nothing to do with it. So imagine, meaning forget about the spiritual aspects of this. Imagine it's not effective at all. But it could add to the animosity within community because, there's somebody was dating, and this is dating situations that are always very complex. So don't get any ideas from what I'm telling you, but this is a very specific case. And the parents were like up in arms against this thing. I had my feelings about it also, didn't think it was the best option necessarily, but so one of the elements I thought, look, you marry this person, anything that goes wrong, it's her fault, because they have genetic things and health things in the family and so on. Some of them were real, some of them had to be verified and so on. And sometimes when you have already a preconceived notion of animosity, then anything that happens, you just hang your hat on that thing, and it becomes a miserable situation. So therefore, you don't want two people who don't get along with each other. You don't want one of them to be the Shliach Tzibur and one of them being the person that gets the aliyah in Parashat Klalot, because who knows whatever happens afterwards, it could be blamed on this. Shliach Tzibur adds to the animosity, but nevertheless, over here it says it is maybe a chashash sakana. Therefore, you stay away from it. Sha'ar Ephraim writes, it needs to be that Shaliach Tzibur is beloved by people that appoint him, and he loves them as well. If the Baal Koreh of the Torah hates one of the individuals in the Tzibur, they don't get along, mutar ala segan, the Gabbai is obligated. He has to see to it that this doesn't happen. He says it's considered a sakana. And if you happen to know as a private individual that the Shliach Tzibur doesn't like you, and you're concerned that maybe the Gabbai doesn't know, you have been very careful not to leak the problem with the relationships to people, and you're afraid that they may be calling you, then what you could do is you go outside Bet Knesset until they call up another person, then you come in for the Kriyat Torah. Fine, wonderful. And of course, it goes without saying that the Baal Koreh who's reading the Torah is asur for him to think, chas v'shalom, to harm anyone. That would be, of course, a wicked thing to do. If they already called him, then he goes up, even if he feels those things. If you already called him, you don't object to it, you go up, and the zchut of the mitzvah will be a protection. Bezrat Hashem will continue this in the days to come.